are collectively. And I'm sure, oh, thank you, lady. Yeah, we're recording it. All right. So we are 368. I'm sure if you signed up for the invite, you have some sort of idea of who we are, but maybe not. We're a small agency in Louisiana, and what we do is our mission is to challenge common thinking to create an uncommon future. So that's kind of our rallying cry. That's really what we try and do with everything that we touch. And to make that a little bit more clear, we consider ourselves the challenger agency. So every single client we work with, project we do, we don't just want to do the status quo. We want to challenge each other and also the people we're working with to push it a step further. So we're always trying to do that to create this thing we call the uncommon future. It's just that quip that kind of helps us all stay on the same page about what we're working toward, which is a future where things don't look like they do today. And so a big part of that is making advertising beyond just ads. We really don't want to be a distraction or an interruption in people's lives. We want to create things that are interactive and experiences that attract attention rather than demanding it. So a few stats about us: we have been independent since 2010. Our headquarters is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, although we live all over. Our strategy team lives across the nation. So we do collaborate remotely really well. We are one of Ad Age fastest growing agencies and one of Inc. best places to work. We've won tons of creative awards for things from campaigns to video to websites. So we really do it all, and we only have 28 employees. So we consider that actually a lot because we really want to get to know each other on a deep level. We never want to feel like we have so many coworkers that we don't know each other. And everything we do is in-house. So here are a few of the clients we've worked with and we continue to work with every day. We've had some really incredible opportunities, and something that we try and do is, even if they're big brands, we try and treat them like they're an underdog, and we try and think about their problem as if we can expand it. Even if it's Pepsi, there's always a way to innovate and make them better. So that was our little spiel in the beginning, but you're here to talk about strategy. We are the strategy team at 368. So we're excited to tell you a little bit about our stories. But before we get to that part, just a general overview in case you've literally never heard of strategy before. You're not alone. In my experience, which I graduated college now like 6 years ago, it wasn't really something that my school talked about a lot. And I think other people I've spoken to had a very similar experience where strategy was something that you kind of heard about, but it was so amorphous and ambiguous, it was hard to really pin down what it was. So yes, it is often a very lofty thing. And you can see by our definition, it's a little flowery, but we are going to break it down for you. So strategy is the practice of gathering context to uncover the human truth and inspire uncommon work. Even that, which we thought was a pretty simple definition, is kind of, like I said, flowery. So we broke down what we mean by this. Practice means that strategy truly is a practice. It's never the same answer twice. You'll never work on the same project with different clients. Every client is different. Everything you need to do is different, but there are a few tools that you can use to get to the same place, which we'll go over later. The next is gathering context. A huge part of being a strategist is research. So a lot of strategists actually end up becoming full-time researchers, or vice versa. Researchers will become strategists because you really do need to look outside your own perspective in order to get information from the world, in order to make work that kind of resonates with the world. And that's what we mean by uncovering the human truth. So it's not the client's truth, it's not your truth. If you want to have a piece of work that hits on your audience that you're trying to target, you want to make sure you're uncovering their human truth. So how do they feel and what do they want? Those are the best places to start when you're building a campaign or trying to make a website or trying to make anything that humans will be using. And then lastly, uncommon work. As you could pick up by now, uncommon is a really big theme at 368, and we're always trying to make that uncommon future through uncommon work. So what the strategy team does here is we do the research, we try and find the human truths, we take a bunch of different tactics in order to create a springboard for the creative team so that they can go create work that's truly different than any other agency is making. So that is all kind of the lead up. Hopefully we have everyone who wanted to be here because this is now the meat of what we wanted to talk about. And I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Strategy, Tara, to introduce our team and really kick off our stories and kind of how you can get to where we are.
Perfect. Thanks, Kaitlyn, for laying it all out. And that intro that you kind of broke down for us is so interesting because you can do that practice in so many different ways from so many different points of view and skill sets. And so that's what this represents for us, is all of the specializations that make up our team. And this is just a drop in the bucket because we are a rather small team. There's 6 of us. I had to count real quick. So as Kaitlyn said, I'm the Director of Strategy, leading the team. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But we also have a few different disciplines. So first you'll see our experienced strategists here, Hailey and Cody, and you will learn a little bit about the different perspectives they take to make kind of a yin-yang dynamic duo in this discipline. When we say experience, we mean all the ways that an individual, consumer, or stakeholder interacts with a brand and all these touch points. It can be really nebulous, but it can also come all the way down to the most minute detail. We also work a lot in communication strategies, marketing, advertising, and that's where Caroline really shines with our media. And so when we reference media, we don't just reference advertising and paid media, but again, what are all these communication touch points that we can deploy to really get a message across and again, interact with our audiences. And then finally, tying it all together is our brand discipline. And so this is setting the identity of the companies and organizations that we work with. And I'll let Brian and Kaitlyn, of course, tell you more about that. But the interesting thing here is, like I said, you can have specialties, you can be a generalist. There's so many opportunities just depending on what your unique perspective is in the world, where you really get a lot of energy, and how you like to spend your time. So whether you're a really conceptual thinker, whether you really enjoy that research and interrogation process, whether you really enjoy putting numbers together or, looking at data, really anything. If you kind of touch in design, but really like thinking about what goes into the design, if you want to specialize in social media and culture and how a brand may interact in a certain channel, as broad or as specific as you may want, there's probably a place for you, just depending on the type of team and environment that you work within. So what we're going to do in this section, and I'll kick it off, is a really smooth segue, but we'll each go through and share how we got here to where we are at the moment, and what our role looks like in a bit more detail, maybe some examples of how we spend our time, and maybe a few tips that have been really helpful to us to get here. So there's me. That's a headshot from a couple years ago. So as Kaitlyn mentioned, we are all distributed. So we are spread across 3 different time zones, which makes our roles all really interesting as well. This virtual collaboration, our whole team is hybrid, but it's also interesting because we all bring kind of unique perspectives and environments that we live within to the table. As the Director of Strategy, I lead the team and help us really amplify those perspectives and amplify all of the work that every individual is doing here. So I've spent time in every one of these roles in different projects and different moments in time. My origin is in MySpace. I'll start there. Back in the day, I kind of piqued my interest really playing with HTML and building out my MySpace profile with my friends, and it just always stuck with me through school. Then I found yearbook and journalism, and I really loved telling stories about real life happenings and people. I always thought it was really interesting. I love writing, but I've personally always found it challenging to write complete fiction and to make things up, because our world is so ripe with stories to be told that are already real. And so that's something I kind of looked into. And then as I was like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Well, this web thing and building things on the web was really interesting, and laying out stories and researching those stories, and my mind touched on journalism, but I also wanted to have a life. And journalism is a very hard career. It's one that I respect a lot, and I went to a journalism school, but I knew I didn't want to make my career on that. So then I found a PR degree. I'm like, okay, public relations, what is this? I learned a lot of really helpful things, but it was not a strategy degree. In my school experience, you had PR and you had advertising as completely separate programs, and you never really collaborated. So I learned a lot about communicating those stories, about reaching audiences, and not a whole lot about putting it to practice. So it was an interesting time, but as I'm coming up through school, I found the opportunity to again take a class in code offered through my PR degree, which was which was an interesting experience. And then I found an internship with this small shop in Baton Rouge, formerly called YOLO, but they had rebranded to Hatchet when I found them. And it was this wacky group of individuals who were building websites and building brands, which I thought was such an interesting cross-section of my interests that I'd kind of discerned through school. I also tried a nonprofit internship for a while doing PR for them, and didn't really go as I wanted it, but that's the value of internships, right? Dip your toe in, see how it fits for you, see if you see yourself there in the long term. So I found Hatchet, I became an intern. I was originally hired to do marketing for the agency. So just tell the stories of the agency, keep our presence active, and, really focus on thought leadership. And I did that for a while, but I started to find opportunities to help the team out. At the time, it was a team of designers and developers who would kind of do this thing that they called strategy as needed. There was no individual focused on it. So whether that was writing or headlines or site maps for websites or drafting a mission statement for a new organization, whatever it was, there was just opportunities where I could help out and kind of put some thinking to it, put some ideas forward, maybe cover some gaps on the team. So I did that for a year. And then as I'm coming up on a year of being with this team and working more and more with clients and being in more meetings and showing how I can help bring our projects to the finish line, we decided to merge with another company. Now, if you know the origin story of 368, you know where I'm going with this, but you might not know. 368 is the result of a merger between Hatchet and Big Fish Presentation. So like I mentioned, Hatchet did websites, interactive, and brand work. Big Fish did film production, presentation design, event production, presentation coaching. So Big Fish really focused in the live and in-person kind of influence space. It would have never been Big YOLO, although we did entertain Big Hatchet for a second. But our offices were actually just so close to each other that we would walk back and forth, right? We would spend time with each other. Our teams were both young. We both saw so much potential and really shot above our weight class with a lot of our work. And so we collaborated, and it became a point where we joined forces to be better together and to join our perspectives. And our offices were about 368 feet apart. So that whole joining, we really wanted to honor that for the long term and remember our roots and where we came from and the spirit that brought us together. So me as an intern who was kind of trying to find my place, I joined this team that was interesting, and then started to find a spot for myself within that team. I was offered a full-time position that aligned with the merger, and I became the team's first strategist full-time in that moment. Jeremy, one of our founders, he did hold the title Chief Strategy Officer. He's transitioned to a Chief Creative Officer role. So working hand in hand with Jeremy over these past 7 years, wow, we've built this discipline of strategy. And in a unique way, we didn't inherit these preconceived notions of what strategy has to be from these big bad agencies across the world, but instead built it with what we need and how we wanted to do this kind of work. So we've kind of segmented off in the early days. We were generalist strategists who just did whatever our clients needed, and that kept us busy. It was an interesting time because you had to know a little bit about a lot of things, and then you'd have a specific problem to solve, and you'd have to go and look through your toolkit and pick something up. But you probably have to research it a bit too and figure out, okay, I need to run this channel. Let me go see what's the latest here. And as we got bigger projects and bigger clients and more work, it just became difficult to do that and do it well, because really what we want to do here is high quality work, not just quantity sweatshop. So that's where we started segmenting off, and the team's grown, and as new opportunities presented themselves, and we have developed new roles. So that's been a really interesting journey, and I've been kind of at the helm of it throughout. So that it's really awesome to see, today is something I'm so proud to see. Kaitlyn has spearheaded this event because we wanted to really, like we said, pull back the curtain on what this is. Because even as we were building the strategy team, it was still, we knew there was a need, but it took a while to connect the dots and see what else was going on in the world and all the people that can really be great strategists. So what my role looks like now is really interesting and quite different on a day-to-day, but I do, of course, working with the rest of our strategists, helping them produce work that they're incredibly proud of, that isn't uncommon, that challenge meets our clients' goals, because we're here to do work that is that pushes the envelope, but also it needs to be effective, and we need to prove business value, because we don't get paid if we can't prove that we're a worthwhile investment. In the same way, I work with our growth team, which is our new business side, as well as our account managers who are finding growth opportunities with our current clients, to really concept how we can solve the problems our clients bring to us. So that takes a lot of listening as well as reading between the lines. That's where the challenger agency moniker comes into play. So asking really good questions is an incredible skill. You have to be curious, and you have to look for the context below the surface. Oftentimes, it's common that somebody will come and say, I need blank. I need a campaign to run these dates, and it needs to sell this product, or I need to build trust, or whatever it is. And you might need to dig a little deeper and figure out what's the problem we're actually solving here, and how can we do something that goes beyond the surface level and pushes your goals forward and makes you successful in the long term, whether that's the business or the individual point of contact, because ultimately we're serving humans, and humans sign our checks. We're not, we need to make the business look good, but we also definitely pay attention to the individual. And then I also work on the executive leadership level, taking these big visions that we've set for the company and what we want to be known for, and working with the rest of the leadership team to make that real, to make us a thriving business, to really mold the company culture that we want to promote here, and and to become known as the challenger agency and the creative epicenter of the South, which is our long-term vision. So I think I've said enough, and I'll just leave y'all with some thoughts, because I have been responsible for hiring all of our team, having to fire a couple people, turn a lot of people down who weren't quite the right fit. I've looked at a ton of resumes, everything from entry-level people who have no experience in strategy, no background in strategy, all the way through to people who have decades in the field. And sometimes the hardest part of it is, how do you get your foot in the door, right? It's not a field that you have a specific degree path for. It's not a field where you can go to to a specific certification, or you get a specific degree and you're set up. Some fields are like that, but there is plenty of demand for strategy at the same time. And the interesting thing is, it really is more of a personality and an impact, and strategy as a discipline can be found in so many different areas, whether you have a background producing events, or you were a small business owner, or working with the family business, or you so many things. I could go on. So if you're looking for a strategy role and you want to get your foot in the door, and maybe you've put in some applications and you're not getting calls back, consider how you tell your story, because this is the craft of storytelling. We have to figure out which stories resonate with our audiences. Well, you have to practice strategy on yourself to tell the right story to the right person at the right time, right? And be interesting. That's something else, because you're one of many who the hiring manager or leader or whomever is probably talking to. To do this work, you need to have a point of view in your own life. This craft takes a lot out of you. The craft of thinking and creating is, you have to invest a lot of yourself. That means you need to have a source to bring energy to yourself that is outside of the work. So bring that to the table. What makes you quirky? What are you passionate about? What have you experienced that is not common? What do you like to talk about around a table with a group of friends? We want to know that. And so combining those two together, when you're telling stories about the work that you've done and how you've made impact in the past and your past experiences, and you're bringing your interesting personality to the table, if you're going into any conversation, do a little pre-planning and think about the 3 things that you want the person that you're interviewing with or talking to remember about you, and make sure those come forward. Find a way to work them into the conversation. If they don't come easily as an answer to a question, don't be afraid to say something at the end. We didn't cover this in our Q&A, but I'd really love to share this, or for you to know that this is, what I bring to the table. And don't be afraid, and bring good questions, because that's the other thing that we're about, is bringing good questions. Also, yes, the bear was on my porch last night. This is what I'm passionate about. I live in a cabin in the woods, and I'm so grateful to remote work and to this team for letting me follow my passions into the mountains of Colorado, which is where I live and thrive. So it's interesting. That is my my soapbox. I will pass it on, and I'm excited to hear from the rest of our team and probably learn something new from their stories.
That's me next. So my story is very similar to Tara's. I'm Hailey. I'm the experienced strategist. that little content piece you see highlighted, I started as content strategist. I'll talk more about that in a second. And was recently role changed to experience strategist. So my story is very similar to Tara's, as in I went to school for a PR degree. In high school, I was really big into public speaking. I really liked the part of like writing speeches, planning campaigns, but I knew that I didn't want to be some kind of politician or lawyer. So I was like, I'm gonna be a publicist. I'm gonna make it easy for other people to do these things. So I went get a PR degree. While I was in college, I was having a really hard time finding public relations specific internships within Baton Rouge, right? And this is before remote work was as popular as we see it today. So I found that I kind of loved planning and strategizing and really honing in on how people react to things. So I slipped into the marketing, advertising, and web world that way. I really like looking into how people react to websites, react to campaigns, using my sociology minor, really thinking about how different groups and different socioeconomic groups or audiences might react differently to different ways we tell stories or different ways that we present ideas. I really liked putting all of that together in this holistic plan or strategy before I knew it was called strategy. This holistic strategy that really, really connected with audiences and built strong foundations and understandings. So I bounced around few internships, tried the nonprofit life as well. Wasn't my thing. My senior year, I actually became Tara's first strategy intern in the early days of 368. And then I went off, truth. So Tara and I met in college and we're in PRSSA, the Public Relations Association, Student Association together. So I worked with TSC in the early days as a strategy intern. And then, bye Samantha, sorry. And then I found a job as a marketing specialist at a health system. Really networking helped me get this job. And it came with a little bit more project management responsibilities than I think I was looking for in a career. A little less strategy, a little more project management, moving the task, right? Then Tara, again, went and poached me back to 368, and she helped me grow and specialize my skills. So like I said, I started as a content strategist. She came up to me and she was like, I need you to tell stories and build strategies around stories for 368. As I continued to do that and grow my skills, the company as a whole really, really helped me grow and specialize. So I've moved away from that content strategist, not fully, but I've moved more into a holistic take on user experience, personalization, content, and accessibility with my new title as experience strategist. So that's my story. What does this mean? What are the types of projects I work on day to day? What is my role? I help brands understand their customers' needs to then create experiences and interactions that they actually want. I plan, facilitate, and execute human-centered experiences across technology, customer journeys. That's what you'll find on my LinkedIn profile, right? I work to capture the voice of audiences and deliver impactful audience experiences. I've used my experience in content, PR, and marketing to help develop personalization and accessibility methods and practices for brands. My preferred project type is going to be web or microsites, but anything experience-based I can help with. Like Tara said, I was in the early days of 368, which means we all kind of had to help do a little bit of everything. So I definitely learned that role of doing a little bit of everything and moved a little bit more into the web and experience world. So a few of the other things I'll touch on: marketing installations, mall installations, airport installations, not the builds of them, obviously, I'm 4'10", what am I going to do there? But more like the strategy behind it. What content are we presenting with these audiences? Who might be walking past these installations, and what's the experience that they need or expect from us? Sometimes I'll touch on some brand campaigns as well as video experiences. So One project that we have with a client right now is this really cool video series where we actually talk about the future of technology. What does that look like? So I help interview our guest, and then I take everything they said in an 1.5 hour long video and I meld it into a real story. And then I help send it out on the web and give it a life. For all my projects, regardless of what that is, I help plan and lay out the strategy, the what, the how, the why we are doing something, and its effects on our clients' goals. For example, a website. I'm going to help build that sitemap and that information architecture of a website. I'm going to keep accessibility and personalization in mind as I help build that. It's like the structure of your home, right? The foundation of your home. In the campaign, I'll help with metrics and channels. What are we looking for? What are we trying to measure? What are our KPIs? Whoops. And then obviously I'll help copywriters and designers just help facilitate our strategy into the real world application of it. Tips and tricks. When I think of strategy, I like to ask the question, are you more visual or are you high level, big plans, right? Are you very tactical pieces or very high level? Visual to me is very web and experience. While when I think of big plan strategy, I always think of holistic brand strategy. Again, this is my personal opinion. Someone in this call might disagree with me, but I'm a very tactical person. While I do look holistically at the website as a whole or the experience strategy as a whole, I really love just digging into the tactics of, does this button work? Does this headline work? Does this copy work? That excites me, which leads to my next tip or trick. Where do you get your energy? Do you get your energy from social media? That's a great opportunity to be a media strategist. I'm sure Caroline's going to talk about this in a little bit. Or do you get your energy from browsing websites and, learning about how websites are working? So it's all about what you really resonate with and enjoy doing. As I was reading in the chat, we work 368 days a year. We don't, but 365 days is still a lot, and you got to love what you do. So that's really what I think of when I'm thinking of tips and tricks. Very specific tip or trick would be to check out Sweathead. It's a podcast produced by Mark Pollard. Really gives a holistic view of strategy, and his courses really showed me that I'm not a brand strategist. I took a course thinking I'd be molding into a brand strategist, and it taught me I prefer that tactical and tangible strategy. With that and my content background, I'm going to pass it off to Cody, who's going to talk about his UX background.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hailey. Yeah, that's not me, but I think I'm on the next slide. Anyway, with Hailey and I, there he is. That's an old one. I need a new one, new picture with more wrinkles and crow's feet from these kids. So recently had a kid, anybody knows. But yeah, so, okay, I'll leave it. If you guys have ever played, and I'm going to show my age here, but if you've ever played Marvel versus Capcom, it's like the first platform gamer of fighting where you could like tag team people in, like your teammate, and that's Hailey. Anytime I'm on a project and I need to, yeah, Kenny, there you go. Anytime you have to tag team someone in because you're getting your butt whooped, Hailey's my go-to. So I kind of joke about that. It is an older game, but it's fantastic for the analogy. But yeah, again, my name's Cody Coumes. How did I break into strategy? Like Kaitlyn said, there is no degree field like, hey, advisor, I want to go into strategy. Like what? So I went into digital media, and essentially it was right in the middle of the 2008 recession when I graduated. And I was just like, I'm going to join the military. So I did the military gig for 6 years. Realized I really liked the strategy of operations. We did a lot of stuff with squadron, helicopter tactics and things like that. And so I kind of like that. And that stuck with me. Fast forward, I got out of the military, and I was a full-time freelancer. I was going back to my digital media degree and creating things, worked with nonprofits, different things, a lot of veterans, as you can imagine, stuff like that. So, but I started my MBA program, and I was like, I'm going to go into marketing, and I'm going to love marketing. I hear all about it, and it's going to be great. And the classes were great, but it just wasn't, like Hailey said, it wasn't energizing me. And so through that, I got an internship through my school, and I worked with a lady. She owned a gym. She was a business owner, a very, very hustle culture type of person. And basically we worked on building an app for her, and I really enjoyed that. The app fell through in the end. She made some crazy business decisions, but I was like, man, I really like this. And through that, I discovered UX, or user experience. And so I started digging into that. I switched my studies from that to UX, moved to New York for a few months, lived there, did a boot camp. So I'm one of the few boot campers. I guess I'm addicted to boot camp. I don't know. I got issues, but yeah. So like I said, went to live in New York, went to General Assembly, did an immersive program, and it was insane. And while I was there, I got a call from Tara. So Tara's like Ron Burgundy. If you've ever seen Anchorman, where she blows the horn, and like all the strategists, like she is that person on our team. So yeah, glutton for punishment for sure. But anyway, that's a little bit of the backstory. I've been at 368 for 3 years now, and almost 3 years, I'm sorry, and haven't looked back, but I've recently expanded from UX strategy into experience strategy, and it's been fantastic. So a little bit, I'm gonna dive into some of these comments. I see them popping off, but typically the projects I work on have been websites, some apps, other digital products. Like I said, I have recently expanded into experience strategy, which takes a holistic view of what, how does this person experience your brand or this product? How can we make it better? I really enjoy leading research and strategy. I love talking to people and seeing what their problems are. How can we make your life better through this product, and bringing that to the table. And working with the designers, we've got very talented designers and developers, and working hand in hand with them through workshops, things like that, to build that best product for the user is what really gets me excited. So seeing people light up, they're like, oh my gosh, this feature or this thing you guys added, that like completes my soul. So other than that, some different things I work on, informed deliverables such as creative briefs. I may help write those, sketches, wireframes. If you look over here, there's a wall full of Post-its. So I pretty much keep Post-its in business, Sharpies as well. So using a lot of different things to create, user flows, personas. Most recently, we worked with a client. I don't know if we could talk about it, but we worked with a client to create just a whole new experience for them, and it was fantastic. It's still hush hush, but I won't get into it. But that was fantastic. So tips and tricks, and I want to keep mine short to give the other people more time. Tips and tricks, if you're looking to get into strategy for user experience or experience in general, just take it simple. Read some books, listen to some podcasts. There is a great podcast by someone in this chat named The Great Design Podcast. I'm gonna give a little plug out there. And she talks to tons of people about strategy and UX and things like that. So if you are interested, that could give you some insights. Mark Pollard also with Sweathead. Hailey, you beat me to it, but Sweathead's really good. I will listen to him while I'm riding my bike around the neighborhood and just listen to new insights. Couple of books that I would recommend if you guys are looking into this. There's just a few. The design of everyday things, and any of these purple books, any of these O'Reilly like purple books, like UX strategy, information architecture, mapping experiences. These are all great examples, and they'll give you an idea. And if you're in this and it's like giving you some kind of like emotion, you're relating to it, pursue it. I would do that just as a practical way. And I think that's all I got, so I'll pass it off.
Hey everybody, my name is Caroline Stoltzfus and I'm the media strategist here at 368, and I've been with 368 for a year next week, so it's pretty exciting to look back on even how my role has formed and my career before that, even over this past year. So when I was younger, I had big aspirations to do something that changed the world. And at first I thought that was politics, and that's just not where I want to be at all today. And then I thought maybe I could be a part of telling great stories on the news, and I could be a news anchor. That's not really how the news works today either. It's really about who's talking the loudest, right? So I had this naive idea in high school that maybe I could be the first one to start like a good news only channel. And I think John Krasinski beat me to that. So where did that leave me? I was pretty confused in college about what a communications degree even meant to the world. If you get a communications degree, you walk out, you hand your resume out to people and you say, I have ways of thinking and I'm a really good thinker and I'm a really good learner, but I don't always have all these hard skills, or I've learned just a little bit in a lot of hard skills. And so in my first job out of school, I was actually an executive assistant, and that turned out to be a really hard position for me because the more that I was there, I just found that I loved engaging with ideas. And I still wanted to change the world, but I just found out that that would be a smaller piece of the world maybe than I originally thought when I was a younger kid. So I fell into the world of nonprofits, surprise, surprise, when thinking about everybody else's path here. I ended up working for a homeless shelter in their marketing department in Cleveland for 4 years, and I loved it, loved it. I think the reasons I loved it is because I constantly got to ask questions about why. And when I was a kid, I got in trouble for asking why too much because my mom just wanted things to be what they were without having to explain everything. But regaining that skill of asking why did somebody end up in this position? Why would somebody give to a cause when they're not really getting anything tangible in return? Why can't we all work together a little bit more to help people in need? So through that process of working at the shelter for 4 years, I was really able to find a lot of purpose in that work and grow some great basic skills as well. So as a media strategist, a lot of what I'm doing is helping put the right message in the right place at the right time. And my background allowed me to do a lot of practicing in social media. I learned way too much about direct mail, which I really thought was dying, and it's still around. So there's just this whole world in media, in campaign planning, in out of home that is infinite. And I think that's kind of the beauty of being a media strategist today, is that the sandbox that you get to play in really is infinite. And I arrived at 368 after having moved to Colorado, having to leave my last job, and being in a professional network, meeting Adrian, who's our chief growth officer here at 368, who introduced me to Tara, who also lives in Colorado Springs, kind of, but in maybe a cooler spot than me. We just began having some conversations about our work, and when this role opened up at TSE, took the plunge and applied here after being in a brief project management role, which I realized was not for me. So all that to say, it's kind of funny. You never know how you're going to arrive in a certain role, but what I would say about media strategy is it's for people who like organized creativity. It's for people who want to reverse engineer that final action in a buying process, in a donation, in the sign up. So thinking about, here's the client and here's what they want to happen. These are their business goals. Who are they really talking to? Where do those people hang out? How can we do this efficiently and effectively? What channels can we use? What types of messages should we tap into? And really, I work really closely with all of the strategists here in order to organize their brilliant thoughts, talk with the creatives, and help bring everybody together to pass those messages down the pipeline and track how people are reacting to that. So people on the team probably might say that I'm the most disenchanted strategist there ever was, because I really hate that interruption part of marketing. I do. And so I love the philosophy that we have here at 368, which is interaction over interruption. And so as you're pursuing your career in strategy, thinking about it, some tips that I would have for you are just to really think carefully about your whys. Why do you want to be in this field? What drives you? What kind of questions drive you each and every day? And who do you want to work for and work with? Like, the team here at 368 is phenomenal, and we handle all kinds of different things coming at us each day, and it's such a great collaborative place. So I would encourage you, if you're specifically interested in the media, because you're going to work with so many different types of people to get in via networking or conversations on LinkedIn or professional networks, just to really understand the type of agency that you're going to be working with or hope to work with before you get in there. I definitely watched Mad Men and was like, that looks awesome, even though the whole storyline is horrible. And to be honest, like, there's a lot of glitz and glam out there, but at the end of the day, it's the best to work with people and ideas and projects that you're gonna love and grow from. So that would be my encouragement to you. Beyond that, practical tips, definitely try new things. I think as a strategist, the most important thing you can do is get comfortable being uncomfortable. I ran cross country in college, and that was something my coach said all the time: get comfortable being uncomfortable. That means trying new things, new foods, maybe a new hike, climbing a new mountain. That's a big thing for me. Or even meeting new people, or trying out, like, visiting a different space in your community. I just think there's a lot of ways that you can become a great strategist by putting yourself in interesting situations and talking to interesting people. So last thing I'll leave you with, practical again, is listen to podcasts. Get in with Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. Think about the HubSpot network of podcasts is phenomenal. Specifically for media, I would recommend Marketing Against the Grain. Marketing Against the Grain is hosted by a couple of their employees, and they're funny. One guy's Irish, so he's got a great accent. It's very entertaining. And it's a pretty quick listen too, if you put it on 1.5 times speed. So yeah, lots of other things I could say, but you're more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to chat more. And we can pass it on to our brand peeps.
Awesome. Thank you, Caroline, and everyone. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here and talk with everyone. I'm Brian Kelly, one of 2 senior brand strategists at 368. I have the privilege of having Kaitlyn also work by my side as a brand strategist. And yeah, just super excited to be here and talk with everyone. I feel we didn't do the best job really articulating exactly what strategy is. So I feel some of you might be brand new here. And if you're kind of looking at us like, what is going on? What are they talking about with strategy? That's like kind of part of the shtick of being a strategist, is like all of us kind of have that, like, what are we exactly doing? And it's that ambiguity that everyone really loves and thrives in. So if you're kind of a contrarian by nature, this is probably the role for you. I started off in strategy recently, like 5-6 years ago. Before that, I worked largely in marketing roles, doing small freelance gigs as a photographer or event producer or all these different things. And once I realized by doing all those things, I had all these touch points that a brand exists in, I could really oversee the overarching look and feel of a brand and the direction that they want to go in for success. I knew that was the direction I wanted to go in. I think right now it's really exciting to work in brand strategy because there's a lot of cultural tension points where people are kind of, to be honest, disgusted or disillusioned by capitalism. There's a lot of conversation about purpose in our industry and performative nature and being demonstrative or declarative. And I see brands all the time that are trying to make an impact in the world, but it just sometimes falls flat. And I I think what gets me most excited is when I can step in, hold a brand's team, and hold them accountable to what it is that they say they want to do. And that's largely what brand strategy is. We're in an interesting point now where brands are no longer like built on being exclusive. It's a lot more about being inclusive. Brands sometimes used to be described as lighthouses, where they would kind of just shine their lights really bright and attract people to them. I don't think of brands that way anymore. They're much more like a flashlight that you hold, and one day at a time, you kind of uncover culture, people, things together. Everything in marketing now is a lot more relational. So if you're interested in people, human nature, developing community, and proof pointing community and finding space for everyone to kind of coexist, brand strategy might be the fit for you. Experienced strategist or media strategist or communication strategist all kind of exist underneath what a brand strategy might be. So I'm a very big picture type of person. When it comes to tactics and day-to-day details and that type of stuff, I fall flat. But when I have to think about a big picture and a long-term plan and orient something in that direction, that's where I thrive and do my best, if you will. And I think right now we're talking about like having a positive impact on the world, on profit, and on people is so important. It's like, I think somewhere around 80% of consumers think companies should only make a profit if they've also had a positive impact on society. So that's demanding a lot of brands right now. And so they need strategists to come in and help guide them to that point. I mean, it's an interesting place to be in. It used to be brands would kind of just like mirror mass culture, and now it's a lot more segmented and there's a lot more empathy building going on. Brands are shifting from being aspirational to being inspirational, kind of going from conspicuous consumption to conscious consumption. We're seeing a lot of talk about sustainability and global warming. These are things that might sound lofty, but the reality is that stakeholders in industries are talking about them, and having the privilege of being in those rooms to help guide brands to the future is like something that I really look forward to. And it's largely why I work in brand strategy. I think 90% of this job is thinking, and that's a privilege. I get to kind of think and reflect and process. And then 10% of the job is writing and putting my thoughts on paper or putting it in a framework for other people to understand. And that is such a lucky position to have, where I get to kind of be immersed in culture, absorb it, and then share it back with people who run these companies that can make impacts on the world. And the truth of the matter is that advertising can exist without strategy, like creativity exists without strategy. It is a privilege to have a strategist on an account. And if we're doing our jobs well, though, it's a privilege that people recognize and they want to fight to have. So getting to be here and speak with people who are young and interested in the industry, but might be a little confused exactly of what it is a privilege. And I think, like other people said, I'm always happy to talk with people, and I always encourage people, be as ambitious as you can be, especially if you're on the younger side of things. Dive into as many different interests and territories as you can. I was convinced I was going to be a fashion photographer. I never thought I would become a brand strategist. But all of those little things I did over the years, had like an obsessive nature with secondhand clothing, produced fashion shows, did fashion photography, all these different things. I still can use all of that knowledge and interest I had to my career today. Another thing is, like, people want to know, like, what are you reading right now? What are you watching? How are you participating in culture? Because when you work as a brand strategist, you're helping a brand earn its place in culture. You're not creating culture, you're helping a brand be immersed in culture. So that means you have to yourself be immersed in culture. So yeah, I'm like the outspoken type. I'm like the devil's advocate. I have like that terminal uniqueness, contrarian quality to me. And I think advertising welcomes those types of people. So if you I would never fit in at like a corporate 9 to 5 job because I think I would just be fired immediately because I'm that type of girl or boy or whatever. And I'm so grateful to work in advertising for that reason at an agency that respects individuality. So if you're kind of a little on the fence about the idea of working in advertising or marketing or corporate culture, or you have that entrepreneurial mindset, I definitely think advertising industries or agencies could be the right fit for you, especially in brand strategy. Yeah, I had a lot of other things I want to say, but I don't want to take up a ton of time. I think my biggest tip is to just ask all the questions because, I have been working now for 7, 8 years, and sometimes I still ask all the questions, but sometimes I'm like, damn, I've been working for a while. I wish I spent more time when I was younger, like in my first 2 to 3 years of my career, asking all of the questions, because that's when I'm supposed to be asking all of the questions. So never fear asking questions, never fear asking for help, make mistakes, get messy, and have fun. It's not supposed to be this serious, tied up industry. And enjoy yourself. I'll leave it there.
Yay. Cool. Well, I will take it up and go last. I wanted to be a therapist my whole life, but my parents both had really dark jobs that revolved around a lot of death and sadness. My dad was an undercover detective for child pornography, and my mom worked in law for celebrity injury and death. And so it was just a really dark childhood. And it was clear to me that they were not going to support me doing a job in therapy because they wanted me to have a job that wasn't so dark. And so even though that's what I wanted, they really encouraged me to find a job that could still let me think about how people think, but make me money and not drain my soul. And so I found my way into advertising. And once I got to advertising, I realized that strategy is so needed, but no one talks about it. And that's what really inspired me to want to have this event. And once I got into strategy, and you could probably have taken this from everything you've heard so far, but strategy is messy. There's no one definition of it. There's no one clear way to explain to you what it is. And so when you're in school and you're just learning about it, it's so hard to figure out what you want to do when you can barely even wrap your head around what the hell it is. And so if you're feeling that way right now, you're normal. I think we all still kind of feel that way about strategy sometimes. And so I did know that I didn't want to talk about media, even though Caroline's a godsend. I did not want to think about channels or KPIs or how to measure things or where to put campaigns. That to me was overwhelming, even though I saw the value in it. And I also knew that I didn't want to be building websites like UX and user experience and where to put buttons and where to put the next landing page. So when you're clicking through, I was not an HTML MySpace girly. That was just not my thing either. I didn't want to do like content writing, SEO, optimizing what goes on websites, planning out how to tell a story on a website or through a campaign from a content standpoint was also not me. And so I was starting to feel like someone who had a lot to offer, but didn't know where to offer it. And that's when I found brand strategy. And I realized that brand strategy is the perfect way to be that therapist I always wanted to be, but do it for the mass people and really listen to people and try and make them feel seen in the advertising they're seeing. And it's not always a campaign. I think you grow up thinking of advertising as commercials you see on your phone or on TV, or nowadays like influencer sponsorships, which yes is a part of advertising. But what I've done as a strategist are things you would never imagine because they rarely see the light of day, but they're so important. I just worked with a huge company on something that you will never see as a consumer, but it completely changed the way that they're going to be talking to their travel customers. And so that's the sort of stuff that as a brand strategist, yes, sometimes I'm writing things to help the creative team make an ad campaign that you will see on TV one day. But other times I'm helping a company analyze their profits and their losses and think of ways to come up with maybe a new product or a new way of positioning themselves in a market to go after a new audience that you would never really think of when you think of advertising. And so that's something that I really like to share about my position is brand strategy particularly is like a therapist mixed with a business consultant mixed with a creative. And if you feel like that's you, I really encourage you to look into brand strategy. But maybe you're like me and you kind of know strategy is your realm, but what I just explained is not for you. I hope that anyone else's stories today kind of resonated, and you can find your way in this big messy world that we call strategy. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks too. For me, I felt really discouraged in college that to get an internship, you had to already have one. That to me felt impossible. And so I went to the local animal shelter and I was like, look, I need an internship. And they were like, we don't have that. And I'm like, I know, but I know social media and you don't. So can I run your Instagram for a year? And I promise you will get more dog adoptions. And so they hired me on as their social media intern. And that's what I did. I just took pictures of dogs and cats and gerbils, and their adoption rate doubled in the first few months, which was so rewarding. But I really had to go and make my own opportunity. And before even knowing it, I was being a strategist. I was handling the story I wanted the shelter to tell. I was trying to optimize which audiences we were speaking to. And so that's what at the root of it, strategists do across all the disciplines you've heard about today. So my tip is to make your own opportunity, even when it seems like a dead end. Just go out there and tell someone like, this is what I need and this is how you can help me and how I can help you, and do it politely. And hopefully that'll help you get in the door for your next job and then your next job. And one day you'll end up running a webinar. So I would love to spend the rest of this time answering your questions. We've been doing a lot of talking at you, and it would be amazing to hear about what you guys are confused about. So let's see. If anyone would like to submit any questions into either the Q&A or the chat, we'll keep an eye on both. I will say we are going to be turning off the recording feature for the last 10 minutes. So if you want to ask any questions off the radar that's not being recorded, feel free. You don't have to be so buttoned up all the time. And if you don't feel comfortable, that'll be your time to ask your questions. But for those of you who do want to ask questions that are more PG or you're more comfortable with, fire away. And feel free to look stupid. If you're like, I don't know what the hell any of this was, say it. Like, we would love to clear things up for you and help you find your path, because strategy is inherently messy and therefore inherently very hard to break into because it's so confusing. And if we can make it a little less confusing, then we've succeeded today.
Well, speaking of making things less confusing, before we go into Emily's questions and any others, Kaitlyn, did you want to share our kind of follow-up offer?
Yes. Hold on. Let me go to that slide. I completely forgot. My bad.
Okay,
we are sending this
back.
deck out after we'll send this deck out after, and you can read this slide. It's just a summary of what each of us do. But then we did want to offer a shadowing opportunity for those of you who have stuck around. Because we can only fit so much information into an hour, we wanted to give y'all the chance to apply to shadow with one of us. If you're more interested in media, you can have an hour or so with Caroline to really pick her brain on what she does, and same with all the rest of us on the call. So I'm going to put this link in the chat, and please, oops, hold on, I'm gonna have to escape for a second. Please apply. We would love to get to know you all better.
Oh, looks like Coy got it for us, Kaitlyn. You're all good.
Oh, thanks, Coy. Well, I'm
There
just
we
going to
are.
repeat it then because I did all that work. Thank
Yeah,
you, Coy.
and we'll also send it in our follow-up email.
Yes, we will. So thank you, Tara. I completely forgot, but that is something we're really excited about to offer y'all, just to really answer questions since this is such a big discipline.
One of the
So Emily,
one of the things that's like
Yeah.
hard about breaking into strategy is that access point. It's, it's something that's such intangible and sometimes ambiguous skills. And so we really wanted to just give you a little bit more, because many of us went to college and have a bachelor's degree. None of us got something that's directly related to what we are doing today. A lot of us took very meandering paths to get here. But most of us are here because of conversations that opened doors for us. And it wasn't because of the degree we got or even because of the internship we got. Those things are how you gather stories. So whatever you're doing, gather stories and then put yourself into conversations. Yeah, this is one of those. Yeah, Emily's question. We'll do that. Strategy and content. Those are tough words. It's content especially is a loaded word that kind of touches on some jargon, and the interesting thing about strategy, content, and lots of different things is they can mean different things to different people, right? And so I think, you know, we might all even have different answers, but one of the most helpful things when you're working in a team environment is to get on the same page, or with a client, right? To get on the same page about what you mean when you use certain words that could have different definitions. And so I think this is an ongoing dialogue that you have to have a lot of times. I know I have my perspective, but I'm interested if anybody else wants to share kind of how you would differentiate or define strategy versus content.
Well, I feel like Hailey needs to take this one away.
Awesome. I was like raising my hand politely, like a good girl. Okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting because my first title, full-time title with 368 was content strategist. So for me, the strategy is the backbone, right? And the content is what you're delivering. That's how I see it. The strategy includes, and again, this is my personal opinion about it. The strategy includes the goals and the research and the background and, you know, all those pieces, all that structure. And then the content is what builds that out. It's the words you use, the imagery you use, the tactics you use. That's how I like to think of them differently. So your backbone is strategy. Your content is almost your tactic in a sense. Do you want to ask?
Cool. And Emily, let us know if you have any follow-up questions. I'm going to move on to Francis's question in the Q&A, and they said that they never realized how much you can specialize when it comes to strategy, and especially because they have a paid media experience and they're really used to having their performance measured. It's interesting when you talk about something like brand strategy, and it's harder to kind of track that. So Brian, this is a question for you and I. How do you measure a successful job well done if our job doesn't necessarily require that? Which is an incredible question. So I'll start with mine and then we'll let Brian follow up. My past job, I did a lot of campaign strategy. So that really did have a measurable piece to it, even though my piece was the very beginning. And there was no way to really gauge if the strategy itself was performing. If the creative was performing, say on Facebook or on Instagram or out in the world, then I could get kind of directionally an idea of how well my strategy did. So it's frustrating because in brand strategy, there is really no way to know if your work especially is doing great. But if you can help the creatives do great work, then you've done a good job. Brian, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think brand definitely is kind of one of the ones where you can kind of say there aren't strong objectives, but really everything that we do is, unfortunately, in my opinion, measured, and data really does become kind of like the key point. So, I mean, I'm sure most people here have heard of the acronym SMART, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Like, you need to set goals for whatever you're going to do. So sometimes it might be, you know, grow market share by 2%, or it might just be like attract new users to the category, or it might be help us grow the toothpaste. I mean, not the toothpaste category, because hopefully you can't grow that. Everyone should be using toothpaste, but maybe it's like, help us grow the, I don't know, like smoothie blender category versus help us grow market share for ninja blenders. It's like there's always something to be measured. And when you're working as a brand strategist who's kind of spearheading like a direction, a plan or whatever, you have to have those objectives to come back to and say what we did worked. Because if you don't, then it's kind of, in the boardroom, it won't really fly. A lot of times the hardest part is when you are new to a client or an account, they don't have benchmarks that can be accurately reflected. So that means when you come into play, you have to say, we're going to capture information before the campaign, and then we're going to capture it after, and we can do a comparison. But
yeah, that's a good point. I think I'll add to that, one of the interesting things is, I think Brian, you said this earlier, a lot of what we do can happen without strategy. Like I said, when I joined the team, there were no strategists, but they were still producing award-winning work. And a lot of it was more ad hoc, it was more like to fill a gap. It was less regimented and less replicable. And that persists. There are teams that still do a lot more scrappy strategy thinking, or that it's retroactively added into the project or whatever that might look like. And that's because it's the hardest to quantify. Brian said 90% of strategy is thinking. It doesn't matter which discipline you spend a significant amount of time thinking. Thus, it's hard to prove the value of thinking. So even if you're working in that more abstract or conceptual space that is brand, I think coming from a paid media and performance and measurement background can be really valuable, because you ultimately do have to be thinking about how you prove the value of the work that you're doing, because we are consistently having to sell in work. We measure decisions earned among our team, because that's how work comes to life, is because we're pitching it and selling it in a way that makes somebody say yes. Because ultimately, when you're a strategist and you come to a table with an idea or a question or a challenging thought, you're making somebody's life harder. Somebody who just wants a campaign that's going to sell products, or somebody who just wants to get to a design and go with the draft that they have now, or someone who just wants to launch a website and they don't really, it doesn't matter to them about this detail or that detail, whatever it is. You have to make somebody's life a little bit harder. So you have to think about, how does this impact the business? Not just the impressions that you're going to get, because that doesn't equal dollars, but how is this going to impact the business? And look at those big business goals and kind of connect the dots and help draw that thread of thought to connect the dots.
Ooh, I love this question. That I really hope I'm saying your name right. Khan, did I say that correctly? I hate messing up people's names, but I love your question. And oh, good, I got it right. Thank God. Okay, so your question, I think, is exactly what we struggle the most to answer. If you couldn't tell by our entire presentation, there is no one process. There are processes in our toolbox that, for example, if a client comes to me and says, hey, we need a campaign out by next month, in my mind, I know where to start. But even though I know where to start, that campaign might end up totally different than the last one. So that question is very hard to answer. But yes, a SWOT analysis is extremely helpful just to kind of get your bearings straight. I think there's a few things all of us do when we first get a project, even though we're in such different disciplines, and that's understanding the client. So really looking at their website, making sure we understand who we're working for, then understanding their target audience, who are they trying to talk to, and what do they want them to do or think. And then we also, just as Brian was talking about earlier, we really make sure to understand the world right now. So obviously during COVID, the world looked very different than now. We're kind of having this post-COVID renaissance feeling where people want to be traveling all the time, and that's why the airports are so clogged. So those things are very relevant to what we do. And the most simple thing I can tell you is whenever you do a campaign, you need a creative brief. Whenever you build a website, you're going to need a wireframe or like a basic structure of what that website is. Whenever you need a media plan, you're going to need to know your channels and how you're going to measure them. So there are certain things that are kind of the way you tackle a project, but your team will help you and the client will help you make it your own each time. So you're not alone. You don't have to come into this knowing exactly what to do. You learn it on the job, and your teammates really help you, teach you how to tackle things each time.
There are a few.
Does anyone else want to add on?
Yeah, no, I'll add on to that and also look to answer Malika, your question about, if we're working on standards and best practices of approaches to strategy. because, you know, like Kaitlyn said, there are starting points, frameworks, there are agreed upon best practices that exist in the world. And so it helps to build your toolkit and practice them so that you have confidence in knowing which ones to put in place at which times. For some disciplines, there's one, Planning Dirty, maybe it has a new name now, by Julian Cole. That's a really great resource and course to go through. Mark Pollard also has one that we love. He actually just started a summer camp for this purpose. You know, there's different thought leaders here who have put together really high quality resources to kind of guide you to have an understanding of these tools. Now, what you have to remember is you have to have an idea that you own. There's no one right answer, but it's a matter of having an idea and making it make sense for other people. So there's a lot of, you know, you have to be able to read the room and understand cultural context of who you're working with and how you're talking. And so those are things that you learn with practice, but you never want to use a framework as a crutch. A framework should be a tool to communicate an idea, not a worksheet you fill in to accomplish an assignment, because then you're not going to get to a result that works. And maybe it's not the right frame for your idea anyway. And if you don't have an idea, are you really doing strategy? You're more probably completing tasks. Among our team, we are in the process of building, and we're continually iterating on those, but we are building approaches to all of our different projects and disciplines so that we can achieve that high level of output we want, achieve, you know, progress toward that uncommon future and uncommon work. And so we have philosophies that guide us. These are our shared values that guide us, and those are very important. And then we have certain steps that we take in the process. These are high level steps to kind of guide you. Sometimes they're reminders, don't forget to do this kind of thing. And they're tools that we've developed and iterated that kind of are the 368 way of doing things. But there's room for interpretation in those. And so that's where you kind of converge, right, with your unique perspective, your unique toolkit, and our agreed upon practices that everybody understands how to work with, and, you know, what we can learn out in the world.
Cool. And Coy, we can stop the recording now for anyone if they want to ask questions off the record. Obviously, don't get too freaky with it, but we understand sometimes it's nerve-wracking to speak or to ask something when you're being recorded.